The V-1 flying bomb was an early cruise missile during World War II. The V-1 was first deployed for the terror bombing of London. It was developed at the German Army Research Center in 1939 by the German Air Force. Due to its limited range, the thousands of V-1 missiles launched into England were fired from launch facilities along the French and Dutch coasts. The German Army first launched the V-1s against London on June 13, 1944, 1 week after the successful Allied landings in France. At peak, more than 100 V-1s a day were fired at southeast England, 9,521 in total, decreasing in number as sites were overrun until October 1944, when the last V-1 site in range of Britain was overrun by Allied forces. After this, the Germans directed V-1s at the port of Antwerp and at other targets in Belgium, launching a further 2,448 V-1s. The attack stopped only a month before the war in Europe ended, when the last launch site in the Low Countries was overrun on March 29, 1945. The Fieseler Fi-103R, codenamed Reichenberg, was the manned version of the V-1 flying bomb. It was developed towards the end of the Second World War and was intended to be used as a human-guided bomb in likely suicidal attacks against the advancing Allies. The Fi-103R started development in early 1944 at a time when Germany was anticipating a major naval landing by the Allies in Western Europe. It was believed that a disposable aircraft armed with 900 kilograms of explosives would potentially inflict heavy damage on important targets such as enemy shipping. However, these attacks would have very likely involved the death of the pilot, who was expected to exit the aircraft and parachute away mere moments before the aircraft's impact. These pilots were reportedly to be volunteers and aware of the risk to their own lives. In February of 1944, Adolf Hitler was initially dismissive of the need to resort to tactics such as suicide attacks. But after the plan was advocated by figures such as Hannah Reich, he did authorize the formation of a squadron to prepare for such missions. Hannah Reich was a German aviator and test pilot. She flight tested many of Germany's new aircraft during World War II and received many honors. She set more than 40 flight altitude records and women's endurance records in gliding and unpowered flight. On February 28, 1944, she presented an idea to Hitler, which would require men who were ready to sacrifice themselves in the conviction that only by this means could their country be saved. Although Hitler did not consider the war situation sufficiently serious, he gave his approval. The project was assigned to the German Air Force. There were about 70 volunteers who enrolled in the suicide group as pilots for the human glider bomb. By April 1944, Reich and some other pilots tested the V-1 flying bomb in a special cockpit. In her autobiography, she recalled that after 2 initial crashes she took over tests of the prototype Fi-103R. She made several successful test flights before training the instructors. Though an average pilot could fly the V-1 without difficulty once it was in the air, to land it called for exceptional skill, in that it had a very high landing speed and, moreover, in training it was the glider model, without engine, that was usually employed. During September 1944, the first real flight was performed, the Reichenberg being dropped from a German bomber. However, this flight ended in a crash, which was attributed to the pilot having lost control of the aircraft after accidentally jettisoning the canopy. The next day, a second flight was conducted that also ended in a crash. The technical department struggled to explain these losses, although there were suspicions that the Fi-103R's flight characteristics could make landing particularly challenging. Seeking to avoid further accidents while also hoping to uncover the source of these difficulties, further test flights were carried out by Hannah Reich. Reich herself experienced several crashes, which she survived unscathed. Tests were conducted with various bombs. The weapon was not ready, but a high-ranking SS general already wanted to use it against the Soviet Union. Walter Schellenberg was a German SS functionary during the Nazi era. He rose through the ranks of the SS, becoming one of the highest-ranking men in the Secret Service and eventually assumed the position as head of foreign intelligence for Nazi in 1944. He supported the idea to use the manned projectile for the bombing of the industrial complexes of Kuibyshev, Chelyabinsk, Magnitogorsk, as well as the regions located beyond the Urals. He gave the order to recruit and train 250 suicide pilots for these projectiles. But during October 1944, Werner Baumbach, a highly decorated bomber pilot, assumed command of the remaining German bomber assets and Air Force special missions, and quickly opted to shelve the Reichenberg project. On March 15, 1945, in a meeting between Baumbach and Hitler, the latter was convinced that suicide missions were not part of the German warrior tradition. Later that same day, Baumbach ordered the disbandment of the Reichenberg squadron. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.